Hopefully, we are live everywhere. Looks promising. How are you doing today, Bryan?
Overall, splendid. How are you today? Yeah, that was a terrible answer. I'm just happy. I'm happy to be back in front of my workstation. I know last week we did this remotely while I was just juggling some chaos with rodents chewing through fiber lines, but now I'm back home, so this is great.
Yeah, we're happy to have you. So, welcome
Oh, yeah.
back to Let's Build Workspaces in HubSpot. And today, I did cover some lead scoring back in August,
hmm
but I don't think we actually had the new lead scoring app in front of us yet, or it was new.
It was
And so now
brand
I want
new,
to
and it definitely didn't have Breeze or anything special built into it just yet.
Yeah, that and honestly, I haven't even played with Breeze plus the lead scoring app, but still, lots of exciting things have changed even since the beginning of August. So I wanted to revisit this topic and dive a little bit deeper into some real world examples that I've seen come up lately,
hmm
some challenges I've seen, some new best practices. Because the biggest thing I think that has changed operationally, there are a few big things, but the lead scoring app is still in beta. Um, but you can zero out activity scores, which is
hmm
a big deal. I've seen some hacky workarounds to get scores down to zero and then trying to get it to come back from that and like rebuild the score when there's new activity has been a huge challenge. So having that as part of the feature set now is a big win, but I think it opens the door to like, okay, well now what do we do with that? How do we use this? And so that's the kind of
Yeah.
thing I want to dive into today. And so on my last stream with Chris back in August, we talked a little bit about how we want to split out scores. Usually I find that people try to load too much into a single score. And so I actually just watched that episode back to make sure I was covering some new content today. But in that, I talked about splitting it into at least three different scores, having contact fit, company fit, and activity. And we now see that reflected in the lead scoring app. So I'm curious if you've played with it much yet.
Uh, to be honest, I've actually haven't played with it that much. It's been more. I've been leveraging a variety of other different intent-based features instead of lead scoring because I know there was just the dawn when lead scoring was just hugely popular and used everywhere, and that was just everything that was COVID. It's just like make me the lead scoring as strong as possible, especially because we have these wonderful things that everyone is doing called webinars that are now just very much a thing, different kind of approach. And whenever you say webinar, I know there's kind of an e that a lot of folks get now. Uh,
Yeah.
but I'm with all the different features that they've been adding, and that's now in beta. I'm really curious to see how it resurfaces, particularly because um, everything that became as a result of like the data privacy laws that all got put into place over the last few years, and I know all of that had a huge impact on lead scoring, particularly in 2020 and 2021, that just made it so much more difficult to track users on an individual level because, data privacy. And I strongly agree and advocate for that. So I'm super curious and keen to see what that's going to look like.
Yeah, definitely. Have you played around with the breeze enrichment and intent yet?
I have, yes. So I've
Okay,
started
I
playing.
haven't.
I've started playing around with the breeze enrichment and intent as well as a few other just general buyer intents. Just kind of start leveraging the what we were talking about a couple weeks ago, where we're using like the lead attribution model into like the actual like the qualified lead attribution model. And very frankly, um, I don't think it's that great yet. And like I think there's a lot of that that's just because it's a newer tool, and newer tools in the LLM space are going to just get better with time. And I don't think it's been in the ecosystem long enough. And simultaneously with that, I don't think it's getting trained as much as we would hope it to be trained because it's kind of self-fulfilling. It doesn't get meaning you have something you want to accomplish in HubSpot. You ask Breeze to do it. Breeze does a terrible job. Like I'm just like putting things out there, not trying to be mean. Sorry, HubSpot, But just like, let's say it comes out, does a terrible job, and you're like, well, that's awful. I'm going to go in and use ChatGPT or Claude, whatever. And then it's like, oh, great, this is what I want to do. Then you use that. You've now had that experience that says Breeze equals bad. And then in the future, you may try it one other time. And when that is reproduced, you're like, all right, I'm not using Breeze anymore. And when you multiply that times how many people are probably having that experience, which may be quite a few, the model's going to be trained on bad information and it's not going to be updated on good information. And then it's going to continually get um, more challenging and not as effective over time. And
Yeah.
so, yeah.
When it comes to intent, I feel like Clearbit has always been pretty good at sort of revealing and de-anonymizing and helping to track activity, and that's commoditized now. Everybody has that. Like
Mm-hmm.
there are 12 different vendors you could type your credit card into in the next 5 minutes and get some de-anonymization on your website. And so Clearbit getting absorbed into HubSpot and noticing where those tools sort of landed. The enrichment, I think, is really straightforward. There used to be Clearbit Batch. I even used that for a client last year where you just import your spreadsheet, it adds
Mm-hmm.
things, and it spits it back out. It was great. It was very
Mm-hmm.
straightforward. And that, I think, is still very straightforward in the app. If you pay for the credits, you get extra information appended to your contacts. But when
Mm-hmm.
it comes down to intent and trying to map that to activity and how we might think about
Mm-hmm.
that in the context of scoring and how that all fits together to try and inform our teams on something, which we'll get into. But if we focus first on sort of the lead journey side of it, how do you find intent sort of fitting into that entire ecosystem, I
Mm-hmm.
guess?
Yeah, and that makes total sense. And I think there's a an aspect. There's multiple ways that you can measure intent, and a lot of folks look at it from, hey, they're coming to my site over and over again, or they're using my content over and over again. And to me, it's like, I don't think that that measures intent. I think it measures interest, absolutely, but that's not any that's not any one-to-one action. One-to-one actions are kind of what I classify as intent. So anything that is a, hey, signing up for a live event, I would consider that a one-to-one. Signing up to having a sales call, or like anything that's very much a, it is you are raising your hand saying, hey, I'm interested in this, and I want to talk, like I want to either talk or hear from someone, not read. um, and very big asterisk for podcasts, because that doesn't count as intent for me either, unless you start consuming lots of it. But that's kind of where the line is drawn in the sand in my mind. And with that said, I think there's an aspect to be discussed for Breeze, and that's more the front end versus the back end of it. And what I mean by that is Breeze is that, hey, I'm HubSpot assistant. Type in me and I will give you what you want. Versus a lot of what we're starting to lean into during our conversation now, that is that data enrichment and all the information that's happening behind the scenes that we just assume is HubSpot native, but is actually everything that was Clearbit is now Breeze, that's enriching your data without you fully realizing it.
Yeah, I feel like Breeze is, we all know it was just a rebranding of things.
Mm-hmm.
One of those things is Clearbit, and within Clearbit, there's the enrichment side and the intent side. And so when we say Breeze, it's really three different things and three different experiences that you would
Mm-hmm.
encounter within HubSpot, because you have the Copilot,
Mm-hmm.
which is the like, give me information or summarize something for me. And that's where, if it can't do the thing that you're asking it to do, you turn back to ChatGPT. I have Hub
Exactly.
Helper Harry saved in my bookmarks bar because it's so helpful for like actually using the HubSpot knowledge base in a way that helps me get my job done. I haven't even tried Breeze for that, honestly. I probably should, but I got so used to going to ChatGPT first,
Of course.
and that habit's hard to break. And then beyond that, you have the Clearbit Enrich, which is now Breeze Enrich, that I believe is a credit system where you buy credits and use them to enrich contacts. And then you have the intent signals that are just kind of peppered throughout, that are still
Mm-hmm.
kind of Breeze, Clearbit. And I haven't gone looking for them, to be fair, but I haven't really seen them pop up much. And so I've played with the new lead scoring app. I took on a client project where I completely rebuilt their lead scoring and tried to do as much of it as possible in
Nice.
the new scoring app. And it was really great. Like it was a good experience to find the limitations and find where we needed to build workarounds, where sort of my custom object architecting might have prevented me from doing something that was maybe easier. Um, but then I spoke with Andres, who's a product manager for the lead scoring app. He spoke at Inbound and is
Nice.
very accessible and super kind and always willing to just jump on a call. And so we talked through some examples and how we might be able to get around that. And so I'd love to dive into those examples, unless you've got some other thoughts to grab us
No,
through.
I think diving into those examples is a really good thought. However, before we do that, what I do think might be valuable is um, spending like 2 minutes here. We just talked about the three different ways that that Breeze exists within HubSpot. I think showing that would actually be something that's extremely valuable.
Yeah,
Just
to chat it
because
up.
I
Let's
know
do that.
I know to your point that is something that absolutely can get buried. So I have it open. I was just kind of thinking of it. I have it open on my screen. I'll
Fire
just go
away.
ahead and share that very quickly so we can give everyone who's watching just a quick look at what Breeze looks at. So again, what we were talking about the three different categories of Breeze. And so the first one is this Breeze Intelligence, which you can just get to by navigating over into your settings menu. And then if you go over on the left-hand side, you'll see a data enrichment under the data management. And that then you have the option to upgrade to Breeze Intelligence. Once you leverage those credits, you can pretty much enrich. Oh, it's not sharing anymore. Share this tab instead. Once you've shifted over and chosen to use one of these credit types, you're able to take advantage of everything that was Breeze Intelligence. The second one that we were talking about, this is Copilot, and that's accessible via on the upper right. And this is the very chat-based tool that we're kind of talking is like ChatGPT. And if you use this,
And this
even
is
if you use
free, right?
ChatGPT or you find another answer, please say, I'm sorry, you're wrong. Here's the right answer, and just paste it in there so we can make this thing better. That's
And
all I
Breeze
said,
is
Danielle.
accessible to everyone, right? It doesn't require an additional, or the Breeze Copilot, it doesn't
Yes,
require an
Copilot's
additional
accessible to
subscription.
everyone. Yeah, so you have that as long as you're I not 100% sure if you have it on the free subscription, but I know every paid subscription has it. Uh,
Yeah.
but I'll need to verify that. And then the last side of the last side of everything that we're looking at is
Intent.
I don't really need to share is really just the property and data enrichment and sorry, not property and data enrichment, like property automations. And so those properties now that are now automated. And so like the automated lead scoring one, for example, like all of that is now powered by Breeze using intelligence and action.
Yeah. One of my favorite features coming out of Inbound was the suggested updates to properties based
Mm-hmm.
on communications with the contact. It's such a simple thing, but it's so powerful. And I
Exactly.
keep talking about it.
Like, oh,
uh,
exactly. And I mean, it opened up some like even at the pro level, like there's so many different more custom objects that you can now use. You can now create objects for listings if you're working in real estate. You can create them for services if you're an agency. You can create them for a number of other things, just really depending on what you want to do, and you can just build the custom properties within each one of those objects to just fit your need.
right. Yeah, there's so
So
much happening. It's really exciting.
yeah. But
I
yeah,
think
with
so.
that
I want
said,
to
let's dive into your inbound.
Yeah, I want to think through some of these examples with lead scoring. And I think maybe in next week's session, we should compare that to the Breeze intent, because I think there's a lot that we haven't touched. I certainly haven't looked at it at all. Um, and I definitely want to dive into where those features are and how they're getting powered, because we know it's not really a standalone thing. It's like a suggestion. And so I'll review my inbound notes prior to next week's session.
All
Um,
good. Let's do it.
But yeah, so the examples that I've come across in trying to use the new lead scoring app, which really fits into the conversation around intent, because we're trying to figure out the contacts who are have the most intent in buying from us.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it really comes down to the behavioral or the activity scores that you're able to build. So the activity scores kind of got the biggest glow up because you can zero them out, and you can specify which activities, and then you can also have a decay for recency. And so those things were almost impossible to do in the lead scoring property that existed before. There were lots of hacky workarounds, like having workflows that
Mm-hmm.
+1 every time someone runs through, or -10 if something happens. But being able to just build that all in one place and have it all in one view makes life so much easier.
Yeah.
Um, Two challenges I've run into with that. One, with my custom object architecting, you can reference custom objects in a contact fit or a company fit score. You
Mm-hmm.
cannot reference it in activity. So for my particular client that I was looking at, they have a Salesforce integration, and we wanted to kind of mirror the Salesforce campaign member status in a custom
Mm-hmm.
object. So we're capturing each of those activities and scoring those activities, which are technically custom object records that are associated to the contact, which is great for lots of other reasons. Not so great in that I can't time decay um, the activity using that.
Mm-hmm.
I would have to have a separate score that I build out to use that. Um, I can reference it, thanks Andres for showing me, in that contact fit score. So if I had a separate contact activity fit score, which is really
Mm-hmm.
confusing, then I could sort of pull it together in the new lead scoring app. But the way I'm doing it now is just like roll up calculations. I assign a value to each record type based on some properties, and then just do a roll up calculation for what those are. Um,
Honestly, just the calculation properties being more widely available is solution enough on its own.
yeah, but definitely the limitation of not being able to reference custom objects in that
Mm-hmm.
it was like, well, I got a little too ahead of myself, but I'm not mad
Yeah.
about it. I'm not going to go back. And I did go in and play around with it a little bit to see what I could do, but not being able to discount it. In my calculation properties for that, I have a 90-day score, a 180-day score, and a total score. So the roll up calculation looks for the activity date or the create date on that
Mm-hmm.
record to be within whatever time window for that score.
Mm-hmm.
And so in that way, I get some decay. I can't obviously, unless I were building out more complex formulas, I'm not decaying it based on the type of interaction. Like an email interaction should probably have a 1 week window. Like you will not remember reading an email a week later. But when you have something highly engaging, like you're saying, that one-to-one webinars or a conversation or some kind of sales room link that they might be interacting with,
Right.
that would obviously have a longer window. And so building this out using the activity score that HubSpot built for us, and you don't go creating a new custom object, will allow you to kind of tweak that to a place where it makes a lot of sense.
Yes.
Yeah, what have you done with activity scores?
Yeah, I strongly agree. And honestly, like I just a big +1 to what you've already mentioned. Like it's really just about defining what is most important to you. And if you're not really sure what that is, like just pull a playbook out of the project management methodology and just use the Eisenhower matrix. Like, like the whole concept of like urgent and important. And if you're able to categorize where it is, like that is how you can model your scoring because the urgent and important is going to be a higher score than not urgent and not important. And depending on whether or not you value urgency over importance, you can model your various different your activity modeling score, and everything else just rolls down from there. And it doesn't take that much more time other than just throwing things in those different categories to just actually implement it. You just add a few numbers into the properties, and you're sorry, not properties, into the activities, and you're
Mm-hmm.
good to go.
Yeah, I love that parallel. I'm wondering if you have any tactics for getting to what activities are significant. I usually encourage my clients to kind of deep dive into some recently won deals and see what that path was. Maybe take 3 to 5 and get a sense of it. and then test some of that against the aggregate. When you do start to build that score, what happens with it? Is that real? But at least you have a starting point where you're mapping that buyer's journey to a real person who really bought your thing,
Mm-hmm.
and then you can kind of make some inferences based on that and build out your scoring to hopefully find people who would follow a similar path. But I'm curious if you have any other tactics.
Yeah, like that's absolutely a good spot to kind of begin with. And honestly, just taking that a step further and just pulling up any record, specifically a contact record. Like if you pull up any contact record, uh, again, for those who you have gone through the whole deal pipeline with, who you've closed one, who you've closed lost, as well as anyone who's been a lead and fallen off the grid, just straw pulling individuals. And you look at the activity pane, which is that big center part of like any of the records. Again, as a recap, on the left is your properties, in the middle is your activities, and on the right is your objects. Uh, and when you look at the activities in the middle, look at the things that are happening frequently and look at the things that are happening infrequently. And I would urge you to pay attention more to the things that happen infrequently but lead to a movement over. Because those frequent things like opening, like being sent an email, opening an email, responding to an email, visiting this page, doing this thing, doesn't really matter that much. But if you have a pricing page that's live and you see that a particular contact is hovering on that pricing page several times, that might be something to pay attention to. Or if you find that when you send out a quote or a proposal, if it has an opened one time or two times in some instances, but opened 40 times in other instances, chances are that 40 times is, oh, this got forwarded and then it got opened by a whole bunch of different people, and that might get things a little bit more convoluted. So maybe you need to change how you're sharing this information. And there's a lot of that you can set up and automate within HubSpot in order to, again, clean all this stuff up. But you need to have that information and that intelligence first.
Well, and thank you for teeing up my next challenge, because the other thing I've seen is that a lot of times you create killer content and it's in a PDF format.
Mm-hmm.
And I have a lot of feelings on how that should be gated or ungated. Especially if you are gating it, make sure that you redirect to a thank you page when it's done.
Mm-hmm.
Preferably with a global form that goes to a global thank you page and somehow dynamically fills in the link. But that thank you page buys you some real estate and gives you one more tracking point. Thankfully, most of the conversion tracking that you need in Google Ads or LinkedIn Ads or whatever has moved beyond a page view. So you can do it on the form submission and not the thank you page view, which is why we used to need thank you
Mm-hmm.
pages. But it just gives you more real estate to give context to the asset. But what I have realized, and I should have known this, is that when you have a PDF hosted and someone clicks to the file, you lose all of the tracking. It's not
Mm-hmm.
counted as a page view. And I actually mistakenly thought it was, because the session sort of tracks. I use an app called Wappalizer in Chrome
Mm-hmm.
to show what tools are being loaded on each page. And apparently it loads like per session, and that is counted as part of the session.
Mm-hmm.
But HubSpot is not running tracking code on your hosted PDF, at least on WordPress. So I do know that HubSpot documents might give you some more visibility,
It's
um,
only if you're using specifically documents. If you're
and
using
not
the
files.
file manager, it is different than documents because files are not tracked. Documents are ones that are specifically tracked. However, you have a limit of how many you can have.
And that experience doesn't lend itself well to a like white paper view or like an
Right,
ebook type view.
right.
It's really meant for like proposal type things or like
Mm-hmm.
statement of works, those kinds of things that are much further down the funnel where you want to capture someone's email if they're looking at it, but it's not like a casual lead gen gated asset.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so the workaround to try and capture those PDF views, you have some options, but you have to build it. So you can use something embedded, where you're like embedding a viewer on that thank you
Mm-hmm.
page. Or another option is to use custom fired events within HubSpot or within Google Tag Manager or something like that, to track when somebody clicks into that PDF from the thank you page. That one's a little bit trickier because you have to map every link. So if you have a really big content library and
Mm-hmm.
you want to, map your assets to the various stages of your funnel, then you have to go and create every single event and map it accordingly. Might be worth it, might be a good process to adopt depending on what you're trying to track and how important that content library is to you. But I think it's an interesting one that I wasn't expecting to encounter,
Mm-hmm.
especially through activity. You can obviously rank or add points for form fills, but as people move towards and as the industry moves towards more ungated content,
Mm-hmm.
and just sort of free education with a focus on branding more so than gating, thankfully,
Mm-hmm.
um, then you have to figure out how to track that if you want to do any kind of intent or scoring or pull that back into visibility.
And that's where things like Owly or Bitly or the Google Campaign Planner are really starting to make a surge again. And that's because you can take these PDF documents and basically create custom URLs that are trackable. And what you do with that is something that like I've been telling clients to do for years is like if you put any kind of custom PDF anywhere, period, just make a bit.ly for it, make a custom URL for it that you can track, and then have that URL be what they get on the button click, not the piece of content, that URL. Because
Mm.
that URL still gets them the piece of content, but you have one more metric that you can track on it, and that can be a huge thing for measuring attribution, and even rolling up further into rolling up intent.
Yeah. And I think that accomplishes the same thing probably cheaper than custom event tracking if you don't
I,
currently have enterprise.
but it is also a one-to-one feature, and like you need to be building that
Mhm.
for every piece of content, which is really
Right.
hard. And again, if you're looking to shortcut that, the only real way you can do it is pretty much exporting all the file links of your HubSpot portal, putting that in a spreadsheet, and then creating Bitly like some kind of custom URL domain, and then you just map all that in a CSV, upload it as a 301 redirect, and then you just make it a point to do this automatically each time you go, or each time you create a new piece of content.
Yeah.
But it that data is going to be hugely valuable, and it depends on how much emphasis you place on that value.
Yeah. So one other solution would be don't make PDFs. Make it a
Mm-hmm.
page, make it a mini site, make it a blog post, like something else that's trackable because then you can also get the scroll depth, you can get time on page, you can grab a lot more.
Yep. I have a solution for you on that one. Custom properties, actually. Um,
Custom properties.
yeah. So you
Oh
could.
man.
So if you want to have some real fun and start going a little bit nutty with it, you can for like shorter and medium form pieces of content, you can create them as custom properties, and then you put it on a publicly accessible page that you essentially have dynamic content living on. And then when the user gets to it, if they filled out a form and you've already cookied them, they see that content with the properties associated that you described it on. And if they haven't, then they don't get that information, and they may get so like there may be a form that they need to fill out instead of where that piece of content may be. And it's it's a little bit ad hoc and a little bit thinking outside the box, but it
It's
does
quite the hack.
work particularly well for written form pieces of content, because you can I mean it's all easy to make it look pretty still. That's a sentence. Wow. But it's all HTML, so you can just call upon that, make it look pretty with CSS, and it's It's the same thing as just plain text. You just now have one more metric where you can basically now filter on your context of, does this property equal yes or no? And if yes, you can essentially see who has access to this thing and who doesn't. And that can be gold for your attribution and reporting.
Yeah, I mean, there's also, depending on your HubSpot subscription level, there's the like membership
Yep.
feature that basically makes it so you don't have to do that hack. But if you don't have that feature, then that hack is definitely a good workaround. That could be fun.
Yep. 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 Membership feature is amazing. And yes, I developed this hack specifically for not having membership feature because that tends to not be a facet until you're at pro or above.
Yeah, for sure. I'm not even sure it's in most pro hubs. I think you have to have a special, I forget which subscription it's on.
Yeah, I think it's Content
I
Hub.
haven't played with it.
Yeah, I'm fairly sure you need at least Content Hub at the pro level in order to have that. But once you have it, it definitely makes a difference, and it can do a lot. It can do a lot of cool things in it. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's definitely worth playing with some of these ideas and just figuring out what works best for you and where you want to be spending your time, energy, and effort.
Yeah. So once you've got your lead scoring model pulled together, you have your fit scores defined and you have your activity score dialed into your best hypothesis you need to test against. You've set your decay so that things like emails don't get scored too highly. Now you need to take that and operationalize it. And one of those things that I could rant on about for days, but I'll just touch on quickly, is you should never un-MQL people. Just
Mm-hmm.
because we can zero out scores does not mean that you should move them back up the life cycle stages. And I primarily say that from a system perspective
Mm-hmm.
because HubSpot is built for contacts and companies to really only move forward.
Mm-hmm.
And it kind of breaks all of the data. If you move someone back, the only way to do it is to clear a lifecycle stage in workflow and then reset their lifecycle stage. And it just wipes out all of the history that you've
It's a
had
mess.
and
It's
how
not
far
worth
they've
it.
come. Yeah,
Yeah.
so don't do it. But then the alternative, which we've definitely touched on in other podcasts, is using leads. You can delete leads or close them out, or using lead status if you haven't adopted leads yet, to have them stay at MQL but move their lead status to, disqualified, inactive, did not connect, whatever makes sense for your outreach and
Mm-hmm.
customer journey. Um, but just please, for the love of God, don't un-MQL people. Just don't do it.
Yeah,
Just because we can zero doesn't
just
mean
keep
you
it
should do
simple.
that.
Yeah, honestly, just with leads, like it's very simple. Just everyone, like honestly, all the differences between like MQL and SQL and just a lead is just the magic little fact of a little number, not number, sorry, letter, an S or an M. Just
Yeah.
you can even keep it simple and literally just go from, are they a lead, yes or no, are they an opportunity, yes or no, and then you, like, as soon as they're a lead, they're always a lead, unless of course they're trying to sell you something and you're like, no, they're not a lead, then you disqualify them, mark them as no, and then just leave them in the leads. And then if you need to do anything with the sales side of things, then bring that part of the cycle into it.
Yeah. I love the activity score and what that opens up for us though, because you can
Yes.
decay it. It gives a better snapshot in this moment of time. So when we think about urgency and importance, you have, oh, this one just popped. You can have like today's hot leads, today's
Mm-hmm.
leads with high activity. And you can pull that list in or that filtered view together with, scores that recently increased, or scores that recently changed and are above a certain threshold. So you can kind of pull that together in a way where MQL, like you're saying, is almost irrelevant at that point. Because as
Mm-hmm.
long as we set a minimum threshold for fit, or have some mix of numbers that makes the most sense, if fit is lower but activity is higher, then you sort of set
Mm-hmm.
that scenario up. But if you can create the workspace, create the filtered view or the list or the dashboard that really highlights those MQLs or qualified leads or whatever they are in your pipeline that
Mm-hmm.
have higher activity today and have relevant activity in the last week, because you can decay that score, it just makes your entire team so much more efficient, and it removes the need for moving anyone back up life cycle stages.
Absolutely. Yeah,
We always love more data.
definitely could have said it better myself. And if there's one thing that I just want to leave you all with, because just keeping mindful of how everything's going, it's just showing you really quickly where you can find these things. Again, Breeze, everything we talked about earlier just lives over on Breeze, and you can go to Overview. And everything we've just been talking about on lead scoring, if you just go to the marketing menu, and then go into lead scoring, you'll have the ability to start building it right from there.
Yep, and I believe that's public beta, so you'll have to go to the product updates to opt into that, but then you should get pretty instant access once you click into it.
Yep, and you're entirely right about that, as is Breeze. So if you start using features of Breeze, chances are you're going to need to opt into all of those things as well. But again, it's really easy to opt into those things now. And actually, oh hey, I'm sharing a cool new feature that I just discovered live. So, actually, when you're on, if you're using Breeze, for example, and you go to set up, you have this nice little beta feature now, and you can see all the different product updates that are live in beta and development or sunset. And you can just go through what is available and opt in or opt out. So that's
I always just go to
nice.
all product updates to make sure I don't miss anything.
Yeah, so you can now see you can go through and just toggle through all the various different betas that are actively available versus what's coming and scheduled for release, so you can get all hyped about it. Oh, this is really cool.
Very exciting. Ooh, that was a fun view.
I have something to play
All right,
with.
well, this has been awesome. Thank you so much for joining again this week, and we will see you next week on Let's Build Workspaces.
Sounds good. Enjoy your week, everyone.
Stopping. Cool.
Woohoo.
I still
Could you
have